Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, the show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. Today's programme is about a passion for movement as we meet the founders behind two fitness-driven businesses. We'll hit the ground running with the founder of a luxury apparel brand making garments that blend functionality with fashion.
Fundamentally, all runners have a very complex relationship with running, and that paradox in running is what drew me to it, and what drew me to it as an entrepreneur as well.
And later, we'll dive into the deep end with the CEO of the world's first underwater streaming headset.
We pivoted and focused on the hardware because we think that really unlocks a much bigger potential in swim.
This is The Entrepreneurs with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Oliver Powe is the founder of Acid Running, a performance meets lifestyle brand inspired by his family's historic tailoring business and his own passion for running. After leaving a career in politics, Oliver set out to create gear that goes the distance, tough enough for a marathon, but stylish enough for a post-run coffee. Since launching, Acid Running has gained a loyal following. Some fans have even gone the extra mile, if you will, by getting tattoos of the brand's logo. More on that from Ollie in a bit. Ollie stopped by Midori House to discuss the upcoming women's collection, new collaborations, and what else is looming large on the horizon. He began by telling me about the start of the journey.
I started off in the dark world of politics, so I've been fully rehabilitated now. So started off working for a political consultancy in Soho. I studied political economy at university. That was my sort of academic route. I was always obsessed with culture, brand, fashion. I mean, completely obsessed growing up. But because I didn't study anything creative, I think like many sort of second wind creatives, I had to find my way through kind of struggle to unlock that in myself. My family has a legacy in fashion. So going back to the sort of 19th century, all the men in my family were either in fashion or in the military. There was no chance of me.
I like that medley. That's interesting.
Those two things work together hand in hand, really. And yeah, there was no chance of me excelling in the military. So eventually the lure of fashion sort of took hold. So my great-grandfather and his brothers set up a tailoring firm in the city of London in 1908 called Hector Powe. And this was a small family-run business. And they served in the First World War. And at the time, the suits were boxy fits, traditional boxy fits. They recognised that the athletic fit that was required to serve in combat, when they came home to visit their wives and girlfriends, they suddenly got that female validation from their suits that they hadn't had before. And they really took that moment of clarity and took that back to their tailoring. And they brought in this athletic cut called the HP cut. And suddenly this tiny family-run business became a kind of household name. They built that up to a luxury brand. And it came full circle. They ended up tailoring officers' uniforms in the Second World War, so fighter pilots and in the trenches and in the Navy. And the business ended up being sold to Burberry in the 1970s. It was a sub-label of Burberry until the 90s. So when I was growing up in the 90s, the brand had just been, the sort of sub-label had just been dropped by Burberry, which gave it this resonance, even greater resonance and mythology in my mind, because I felt upset that I had never experienced it. So that was lodged as a kind of seed in my mind, and I decided it was a sensible thing to do to quit my job in politics and my financial security and relaunch the family label against all advice from the rest of my family. So that's really how I got into this world before Acid Running.
I love it. And it's funny because if people sort of interrogate the brand story and look at how you talk about it and this kind of thing, the messaging, there's all this idea about dualities and kind of suffering for gain and all the rest of it. And actually, when you can weave in these threads from history, it kind of makes it all hang together a bit more naturally. Let's talk about that though, because you talk about, you know, this tailoring heritage, you talk about fashion brand. This is a super functional brand in certain respects, and it is about the purity, not even of like the pursuit, but it's about the doing, the suffering, as you said, very kind of fundamental. And yet you talk about it like a sort of fashion brand. So how do you ensure you are sort of moving all of those levers? Because it's sometimes hard to put function ahead of form and so on. So how does that work in your mind?
Yeah, I think there's an interplay between the brand and the runner for acid running. So we go back and we went back to the original question of what running is and what is a runner. And I think for us, we felt that the industry was stuck in this understanding, this antiquated understanding of running as a competitive and a track sport. And of course, that has its place in running. That's part of running. But actually, if you break free of that and you understand running as a lifestyle and a discipline, you are better able to connect with 99% of runners out there who identify with running as a lifestyle and a discipline. So when you understand that as a runner, then you consider, how do you serve that runner? So you now need to serve the runner from a 5K up to ultra marathon distance. You need to serve the runner after the run as well. Are these garments that can perform on a light jog all the way up to a kind of extreme challenge? And then can you wear them after the run as well? Can you go meet a loved one or friends for a coffee or a beer after your run, and the garment is still able to perform in that lifestyle setting as well? Fundamentally, all runners have a very complex relationship with running. And that paradox in running is what drew me to it, and what drew me to it as an entrepreneur as well.
Well, tell us about product development then. So obviously there are certain kind of fundamentals, whether that's comfort in use, breathability, helping with sweat wicking, whatever it might be. You've got to factor in those sort of mechanical and functional properties. What other influences did you use? Was it about, I don't know, stuff that you'd used, brands that you liked but that didn't quite deliver enough? How did you build the components that you needed to make the product do what you just said?
Yeah, I think the first thing was, again, a rejection of what was already out there. So us as a founding team, we were all runners. We ran every day, and we felt that there weren't brands out there that could serve us and our needs. So if you're someone who, and I'm sure most of your listeners are, discerning customers, where you want a certain level of quality, you want a certain fabric hand feel, when you pull on a sticky polyester t-shirt, you feel like you're back playing kind of mini colt sport again, and all the trauma that comes with that. And I think, that fabric quality was really important. The idea of a relaxed silhouette. So obviously from an aesthetic perspective, we like a relaxed silhouette. That is a contemporary trend. That is what most people want. But at the same time, that relaxed silhouette allows runners of all different body shapes to feel comfortable in their garment, to feel empowered in their garment, and to be able to perform without distractions.
Tell me about what happens when, I don't know, somebody who doesn't know the brand acquires some garments. Maybe they use them a little bit, they get back in touch with you directly or via the various ways you can contact the business, and they say, this worked for me, or it delivered that, and you get that little flicker of validation for these ideas, because there's lots of complexities in those ambitions. What's that like as a founder? Is that the moment when you're like, vindicated, that everyone cautioned me not to, but here we are, this person's got it? How profound are those moments?
I mean, there's actually less feedback than you'd think, and I think it's a reflection of, at the moment, we have a menswear collection. We're launching a women's wear collection soon, but men are typically quite quiet with their feedback, and actually feedback from customers, we have less than feedback from non-customers. So
this I can imagine.
If you look at the comments in our on our Facebook ads, let's say, to new customers, yeah, there is some abuse there around price point, which, that's natural. But I think really for us, a lot of our customers are quiet, and that's again a reflection of runners. I think runners, it's a very personal journey, and I know at the moment there's a lot of conversation about running having a moment, and there's the run clubs, and there's the scene, and there's the Instagram hype. But actually, fundamentally, for a lot of runners, it's just a personal journey, and it's a personal experience, either on their own or with friends, or or with their local community. And I think runners are quite discreet and quiet in that sense. But when we do get feedback, it's obviously wonderful. And I think for me, the most exciting and surreal, I suppose, moment of the last couple of years has been when people have sent us pictures of their acid running tattoos, which is wonderful. And I think that really validates this depth of the philosophy. And we see ourselves as founders as not having come up with some idea, but we're just communicating this idea that already exists.
No, I agree with that. I often have to remind people, I say, it's called the loneliness of the long distance runner, right? I don't want to I don't want to be part of any club that would have someone like me as a member. Let's talk. You mentioned some of the sort of criticism about price point. It's aggressively priced. Tell me a little bit then about how that comes together. How do you pitch that exactly? Because a lot of people will say, well, these are functional items. I think it's crazy. I'm going to spend 100 quid. I'm going to sweat this thing and kill it. And, because I'm going trail running or whatever. Talk to me a bit about how you put together that value proposition, Ollie.
Yeah, it's there's an inherent tension there. And I think obviously price, just economically, price is a reflection of quality and the investment into it. And with the quality of our fabrics, the durability, the endurance of the garments and everything being considered, that naturally costs us a lot of money and we have to pass that on to the runner and they accept that. I mean, sort of to counter the aggressive pricing point, I think, the lovely overshirt you're wearing and the jumper I'm wearing today, they both cost more, I imagine, than our most expensive garment. So I'm
kind of you to say. Perhaps not in my case, but that's the illusion I managed to strike. No, but it's a very good point. And I guess, if people like it, get involved, and if they don't, go away. I know social media seems to encourage this sort of dissent that you've just described receiving, but why people can just go away if they don't like it, right?
Yes, of course, and some people are just offended by seeing something which is more expensive than what they hoped for, and I understand that. But I would say that actually we consider ourselves a luxury brand. I think our runners consider us a luxury brand. Our pricing is actually typically a premium price point, as the industry would understand it. And for the actual longevity of the products and what they're there to serve you on, we think that's a fair price.
Let's have a quick chat through, I think, the bestsellers again. I think some of our audience will know already. They may have, the kind of the 2-in-1 shorts, some of the kind of signature products. What have you got in the range? What are you adding to the range? You mentioned women's wear. That's exciting. Give us a quick sort of summary of where you're at just at the minute.
Yeah, so our bestseller since we launched is our 2-in-1 shorts, really made our name for that. So they are functional, durable, lovely hand feel on the fabric and also odor resistant. So that's really important. You can wear the garment 2, 3, 4 times if you're on the less smelly side without having to wash them, which is really nice. And our t-shirt fabric that we developed about a year ago, so a new t-shirt fabric. So that is a blended fabric. So it has those performance fabrics in there as well, but also some organic cotton to give it a lovely natural hand feel, give it that drape, and again, has that natural odor resistance. We introduced a tank last summer. So this is something that we struggled with in terms of the development because we wanted to make sure the silhouette and the cut reflected the brand aesthetic. We didn't want to have a typical kind of race vest style. We also wanted to introduce a tank for those runners who weren't necessarily the sort of natural person to be showing more flesh. I myself was someone who had never worn a vest or a tank when I was running, and I now wear it all summer. So I'm validation of that. And in terms of what's coming next, obviously we're working on the women's wear range at the moment. We have a collab with Percival coming up, a sweatshirt. We're introducing some base layers and a hydration vest in the winter.
Oh, exciting. Where are your customers at the moment, and where's the business doing most of its work, and what does that next stage of the journey, Ollie, I guess, look like? You strike me as someone with an eye on the horizon. Where does that potentially take us? Give us a bit of a sense of that journey.
Yeah, so the majority of our runners are based in the UK. You'd probably imagine that from big cities, so London, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Edinburgh. We also obviously have lots of rural runners as well. And in terms of beyond the UK, lots of customers in Germany. Seems to be one of the few territories where the runners, well, they won't be runners. Some customers, they will message us saying, I don't even run. I just want to wear this. I want to wear this to a techno gig this Saturday night. So
you need a lot of sweat wicking if you're really giving it plenty.
So the Berlin scene is pretty good for us. But so Germany, the United States and Scandinavia outside of the UK, we have a stockist in Singapore as well. But yeah, predominantly Europe and the US.
And do you mind about that? Because there is a sort of a purity to the concept originally and the sort of intentionality of your dream to deliver this product for runners and to get into this sort of philosophical idea of what it is to kind of suffer and then to reap the rewards. If people say, nah, I'm just wearing it on the couch because I like it, that's fine. That's fine, right? How do you feel about it?
No, I don't mind that at all. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if people, this is it when we say that running is a reflection of the human condition. So for us, these garments are there to serve runners, but they can be worn in any context. And actually, people will buy into this based on the meaning behind the brand and the quality of the garments. But actually, at the end of the day, if we can inspire people to take up running because of the garments, because of the messaging, that's probably the greatest victory.
And I think it's really interesting to keep to that message and keep that sort of purity of vision. But it is interesting if you zoom out and look at trends in the wider business. One of these big narratives is, look, these disruptor brands have come in, and even when it's, you look on the world stage, like performance events or like commercial tie-ups or athlete endorsements, and you have now On or Hocko, whoever it might be. Do you think, actually, I would love to see, this person in an acid running vest or jersey, or actually, I don't know. Does that interest you? I'm sure it's probably an annoying question, but I'll ask it anyway.
It's a good question. And I think, I'm sure that down the line we will have partnerships with professional athletes. I think, we don't see the elite running as the pinnacle of running. I think that's a really important distinction for us, because for us, we see the pinnacle of running to be separate for each individual runner. And I think if you actually look at it anecdotally, if you asked, 10 runners on the street what their 5K PB was, and I'm not saying performance is the be all and end all, but they'll all know it. If you ask them to say who got gold, silver and bronze in the 5,000 at the Olympics, which is the pinnacle of running, one of them might get a name. And if you looked at something like football, let's say, if you ask someone on the street who's top of the Premier League, they'd give you the answer. If you ask them where they are in their five-a-side league, they wouldn't know. So it's the converse of that. So for us, if we find athletes that we feel embody the acid philosophy, and there's a storytelling element there that we think can inspire our runners on their everyday journey, then we will work with them. But at the moment, that's not something we're rushing to do.
That was Oliver Powe, the founder of Acid Running, and you can find out more by heading over to acidrunning.com. Shira Goren is the co-founder and CEO of Zygo, a company making waves in the swimming community with the world's first underwater headphones featuring live streaming and coaching. Unlike the typical waterproof MP3 players, Zygo's innovative underwater headset lets users stream content directly from their phones, a game changer for swimmers. It's an impressive feat, especially since neither Shira nor her co-founder Charlie Melvoin have an engineering background. I caught up with Shira to hear about the innovation behind the products, the unconventional path they took to develop the tech, and the impact it's having on customers. Shira began by telling me about the moment when they took the plunge.
Charlie was working in business. I was working as a lawyer, and both of us on our separate journeys post high school were hyper consumers of boutique fitness. So his favorite was Barry's Bootcamp. My favorite was SoulCycle, but we did everything in between, whether it was boxing, Pilates, yoga, and we reconnected at a mutual friend's wedding, and we were talking about wanting to do a triathlon. And so running, we both have done. Cycling, both of us had done, and swimming really was that unknown, and neither of us had a lot of experience swimming. I mean, we know how to swim, but not for fitness. And when we looked at the category, like there was no options on ClassPass, and really there were no classes to take that injected that same level of fun, charismatic instruction like we've seen in every other fitness category. And so we thought, why not pull the thread a little bit further and create our own 45-minute swim class. That's different than the two options in the space were like aqua aerobics that my grandma would do, or a more intense sort of master's class where you show up at 5 a.m. and it's like an hour and a half of lap swimming, which is really intimidating for anyone who wouldn't consider themselves a serious swimmer. And so we really thought that the playbook for boutique fitness isn't rocket science. You have your fun instructor. We found, we were in LA when we started. So we found actors who had swim backgrounds, and then you have like a warm up, and then there was a little bit of like circuit training. You end with a sprint set, and then we called it swimasana. That was kind of like a shavasana in yoga. So that mindful moment at the end. And we just iterated and created this 45-minute boutique fitness class. And our theory was that people would like it and enjoy it the same way they liked every other boutique fitness class option. And the operational costs were quite low for that business. And so we were like, if no one comes or people like it and they don't come, then it doesn't exist for a reason. But if they do come and they do like it, then it's really interesting to kind of stay in touch and see where it leads us. that was the genesis.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And obviously tell me a bit about how you guys kind of hacked this solution to deliver, coaching and playlists to those participants. Because, I mean, listen, that really is the origin story of the products you've gone on to develop, was that you got to trial these and people were incredibly enthused by the idea of what they could confer. So was it really like one of those classic entrepreneurial origin stories where you're kind of tinkering away, in the garage or whatever, putting these things together? Is that how that started?
Yeah. And again, as we were creating the class, we were trying everything that already existed. So there were above water speakers, below water speakers. In terms of listening to music when you swim, the only things that existed were MP3 players, which wouldn't work for what we were trying to do. And so we found a small factory in China that had this headset that could communicate, and we ordered some, and we started tinkering with splitter. I learned not all splitters are created equal. Again, none of us had engineering background, but we just kept trial and erroring. And so the first iteration really was, we had this headset. It came with like a big Radio Shack transmitter that we put a splitter in, and then we pulled apart two microphones. So we had one microphone going to the phone of the coach so that they could play music that was then held in basically a fanny pack, and then a microphone going to the coach so you could hear the music and the coach as you swam. And so these initial headsets were, in our opinions, like so janky. They were not like brandable or sellable. And later on, when we reverse engineered it, they weren't super kosher anyways in terms of like FCC and CE approval. But for the purposes of the classes, the consumer could put this headset on and hear the coach and music as they swam, which we thought was like, that was our business. And then when we were running the classes, a lot of people kept asking us if they could buy the headsets on their own because they wanted to listen to music or a podcast or an audiobook as they swam. And so we never thought we would get into the hardware part of the business. But once we realized that that was probably a much bigger business opportunity and the problem really came to us, we pivoted and focused on the hardware because we think that really unlocks a much bigger potential in swim.
Well, yeah. And again, that idea of pivoting as you make your learnings is so much of, one of those key qualities that successful entrepreneurs have. Let's talk a bit about the product then. So you pivot into this kind of product direction. And this is where the Zygo comes from, right? It's not just a kind of, this wasn't a name cooked up by brand marketers. It's a truncation of, I mean, you're going to have to help me out a little bit here, Shira. This is how it works, right? It's bone conducted sound. You explain this in a more lucid way than I've tried to do it.
Yeah, no. And bone conduction has been around, like, hearing aids use forms of bone conduction. And so that's not really the tech that we innovated on. But in terms of sound quality underwater, bone conduction was better than in ear. So you didn't worry about like water getting in your ear. So we liked the idea of keeping it bone conduction. And then with our first class company, it was called Swim Team, which was very not ownable. It was so general. And so we're like, okay, if we're going to make a new name for this hardware, we really want it to be ownable. And when Charlie and I were doing some research on bone conduction, I remember he was sitting on a couch in his parents' house, and bone conduction works because it vibrates the bone in your face called your zygomatic arch. And so when we did that research, it was like zygomatic. It was like, what about Zygo? So we shortened that word and we liked it because Z is a cool letter to have in your brand, and then it had the word go in it and felt very active, and so we went with Zygo as a name.
There we are, you see. There's a science to these brands often that people won't always appreciate. Sometimes, exactly, where people are doing things properly. So listen, give us some numbers. Just tell us about the product then, bringing it to market, what kind of uptake you got. You kind of had run some pretty robust consumer testing because you'd done it there, and then people only need to go on your website. This kind of changes the way people are living their lives and choosing to exercise from the testimonials, which must be amazing. But give us an idea about kind of numbers that you guys have been doing and what the growth story's been like.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, our ignorance in terms of building a hardware product, we thought, okay, we'll take a year to develop and then we can go to market. And that was at the end of 2017. And it took us a full 3 years to develop with, getting the patents and the antenna technology. And it's really a feat of physics to transmit audio through water. So it took us a lot longer to even get our first product to market. We did an initial Indiegogo campaign to kind of test the waters, if you will. And we knew our first production run would be 1,000 units. So our goal was to sell 1,000 units. So we had like an initial customer base that we could send it to. And we hit that target. We started shipping in September of 2020. And then, our first full year, we've always been budget constrained. We haven't raised a ton of money, especially compared to other hardware startups from scratch. But in our first year, we did a little bit over $2 million in sales, and we were just selling on our website. And it was in the midst of COVID as well. So some of our like go-to-market strategies had to be pivoted upon as well, just because people weren't meeting in person. So that changed it a bit. And then our second year, we did a little over $3.5 million in sales. And then this past year, we basically stopped the first version and we focused the whole year on R&Ding for our second version, which we're calling Z2, because as any hardware product in market, you learn very quickly what goes wrong, and you can fix some of it, but some of it you just have to put into the next product release. And we felt like it was time to focus on all the learnings we had from 2 to 3 years in market to put into a much better product. And we just launched our Z2 really at the beginning of this year. And so we're super excited about getting this one to market. The better performance, better range, it doesn't cut out during flip turns, and focusing on our app that has guided content, and it'll eventually have lap counting and other features that get us really excited. So we're really hoping that this year is a big growth year for us.
Absolutely. And as you said, you get that sense of how to innovate in an iterative way, and you can do that with new models. Just tell me, in terms of this entrepreneurial journey, we started off here a bit by talking about that. You're a product developer, right? You're selling products, and that's not, I guess, what you sort of were trained in that sense. How do you ensure, other than just learning by doing, which is so much of the journey you've described to us, how do you ensure you're staying at the cutting edge and that you're surrounding yourself with the right people and that you're challenging received wisdom, without having a long background in product development? What's that process like? Do you just have to kind of stay curious, be hungry, look at competition such as there is, although there isn't much really in this bracket? How do you ensure you are able to remain innovative when it's not even in your training?
Yeah, it's a really fair question. And I think, honestly, one of my biggest fears is not knowing what I don't know and not knowing what to ask sometimes. And sure, I've learned a lot over the past 8 years in terms of doing this and working with engineers, but I'm always concerned about my blind spots because I don't have formal training in it. And a big piece of when we decided to innovate to Z2, we have a utility patent on our first version, but Charlie and I both, we were talking and we're like, okay, if someone was going to come into the space and disrupt us or get around our patent, what product would they create? And let's try to create that product. And so we tried to disrupt ourselves. And so we worked with the same engineer to get a new utility patent on a different antenna technology. And so I think Charlie and I are both very curious and always talking to people in the space, or we're trying to always network with people who work in audio or in fitness, and just staying apprised of kind of what's going on in the space. I don't think there's like any way to know like obviously everything that's going on, but we're super curious. We're never like settled. And our goal even now is to create the best underwater headset for streaming audio. And so that means we're talking to different engineers or different teams and trying to update our firmware and our software and keep getting the audio quality better. And so we're not really resting on what we've built, and we're constantly questioning. Right now, we're the only ones doing streaming audio. And in some ways it's great. You own the whole pond and the whole market size. In other ways, sometimes competition is actually good for innovation, and it keeps you wanting to push further. And so we're not really comfortable with where we're at, but I do. Your question is a really good one, because I think it's constantly top of mind, given the fact that, what I bring to the table I'm not doing the actual engineering myself.
Surely, yeah. Tell me, I mentioned this earlier because I was quite struck by how kind of personal all of them were, but the testimonials even on your website, and this must be incredible when all that time and resource and endeavor has gone in, there's still that degree of uncertainty about how receptive is the market going to be to this? Is this really what consumers want? What is that moment like, Shira? Talk to me a bit when people get in touch, whether it's someone, who is kind of trialing a product, or if it's completely cold, they're just a consumer and they write in and say, yeah, this is a game changer, or I couldn't keep myself fit because, it was too boring. But now I'm like in the pool every day. It's really amazing. What is that like? Because that is the critical validation, I guess. I mean, I guess you're proud and excited and you feel vindicated, but can you describe what those moments are like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like when you talk about like the why or what keeps you going, I mean, it is those moments. And I get chills thinking about it because, to be honest, most people who email us aren't emailing to say I'm doing a really good job or that they are so happy. A lot of times it's because they have an issue and stuff. And so when we get those emails and those reviews of people who say it's a game changer, or, we have people emailing us every week. They're like, I used to swim only 30 minutes and now I swim an hour because I want to get to the end of a chapter. We have incredible like weight loss stories. We have people who have, reversed aspects of osteoporosis. It really is those moments that bring it all together. Obviously it's a business, but we really did this because we were two people who wanted to enjoy swimming more, and we wanted it to be community driven and engaging just like every other sport is. And so to be able to impact people's daily lives while they swim and enhance their experience, I mean, that's everything to us, and that's what we're going for.
That was Shira Gorin, the co-founder and CEO of Zygo. You can find out more by heading to shopzygo.com. And that's all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. Do listen out for Eureka, available every Friday. The programme was produced by Laura Kramer with audio editing by Jack Dewars, and you can listen again and find out more about the show at monocle.com. You can also follow us and catch up with the archive wherever you get your audio. To contact the team, email Laura on lrk@monocle.com. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs.